The Sahel was dying. And it wasn't the desert that killed it, it was us. For decades, man cut down the trees that protected him, burned the earth that fed him, and forgot where the wind came from. The price came slow, but it came. The clouds fled. The rain became a memory. The sand advanced like an invisible army, and the green disappeared. In Burkina Faso, entire villages were swallowed by the dust. The wells dried up. Shepherds let their cattle die, and children learned to draw trees they had never seen. The cracked ground was like a map of defeat, each fissure a scar of a forgotten continent. UN satellites called the Sahel an ecological collapse zone. But in the voices of the women who carried water buckets for miles, there was something no report could measure: the will to continue. On one of those cloudless days, an old man raised a handful of sand and said to the young people, "If the desert walks, we will walk too. But we will leave green footprints behind us." And so began a new war, not with bullets, but with seeds. Not with hatred, but with faith. Thousands of hands united. Former soldiers, farmers, students. All against the same enemy, the slow death of the land. The world didn't see it. The cameras didn't arrive. But there, under Africa's cruelest sun, something was born that would change the destiny of a continent. The wind still blows, but it no longer sings the same sound. Because now, in the heart of the Sahel, the desert has met resistance. And from that resistance a promise was born, a wall made of roots, sweat, and hope. The desert is not the end. It is only the beginning of what we choose to plant. The desert knows no borders. And that is what three nations understood before the rest of the world. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, countries scarred by wars, poverty, and decades of foreign intervention, decided to join forces, not just to defend themselves, but to rebuild their own territories. Thus, the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES, was born. A union that began with weapons but matured with trees. Presidents Ibrahim Traoré, Assimi Goïta, and Abdourahmane Chiani realized something the world ignored. The fight for the land is not only military, it is ecological. Without fertile land, there is no food. Without food, there is no sovereignty. For this reason, the AES created the Pan-Sahel Green Initiative, an ambitious plan to reforest millions of hectares, crossing borders and connecting peoples. The objective is clear: stabilize the climate, ensure food security, and generate local jobs. Each country manages a part of the wall. Burkina Faso coordinates nurseries and solar irrigation. Mali leads the regenerative agricultural corridors, and Niger oversees the forest belts in critical shifting sand zones. The data is impressive. In just 3 years, more than 18 million hectares of degraded soil have been recovered, and 20 million trees are already growing under the Sahel sun. The goal is to reach 100 million restored hectares by 2030, creating 10 million green jobs and absorbing 250 million tons of CO2. But behind these numbers, there is something deeper. For the first time, the peoples of the Sahel are rebuilding their own land without asking anyone's permission. The AES Green Wall is not an NGO project. It is a strategy of continental sovereignty, a political and symbolic gesture that tells the world we are not just protecting the environment. We are liberating our future. And while sandstorms still cross the horizon, new lines of trees begin to trace another map, a map without borders, made of roots, cooperation, and purpose. They don't appear in the news. They don't march with flags or with weapons. But they are the ones saving the Sahel meter by meter, tree by tree. They are called the Green Brigades of the Sahel Alliance. They are thousands of men and women integrated into the Living Wall program created by the AES. Among them are farmers, retired soldiers, students, and even military engineers. Each battalion has a simple mission: to plant, protect, and regenerate. From north to south of Burkina Faso, the armed forces work side by side with civilians, transforming former military camps into reforestation zones. In Mali, infantry units have opened green corridors, connecting regions devastated by drought to new agricultural oases. And in Niger, logistics platoons transport seedlings and solar panels across the desert, ensuring water and energy for the planting zones. These men and women call themselves the soldiers of life. General Ouedraogo, responsible for coordination in Burkina Faso, summarizes it this way. For years we wore the uniform to protect the territory. Now, we wear it to make it reborn. The results are visible from space. African Union satellites show continuous green lines emerging along the borders. Each dot represents a nursery, a community involved in victory against the desert. The Green Brigades work in temperatures of 45 degrees Celsius, facing sandstorms and lack of resources. But for them, the greatest enemy is being forgotten. That's why they record everything: number of trees restored, hectares, liters of water used, creating the first Pan-Sahel environmental data bank operated by local technicians. The war is different now, and the one commanding this war is the people themselves. For the first time, the Sahel fights not to survive, but to live better. We are not heroes, says Aicha, leader of a women's brigade in Dori. We are just mothers, sisters, and daughters who decided not to let the desert take the future. Under the same sun that once burned an invisible army, now grows made of courage, discipline, and roots. An army that does not kill, but makes the earth flourish. The desert does not surrender easily. After the first years of victory, the response came. Hot winds blew from the north, sandstorms swept away hundreds of newly planted hectares, and what was green turned gray again. In a few hours, thousands of seedlings disappeared under dunes of dust. The irrigation systems were destroyed, the hoses melted by the extreme heat. The brigades looked at the devastated field in silence. Everything they had built seemed lost. For weeks, morale dropped. In the camps, faces were tired, hands too callous to start over. Some said, the desert won. But in the Sahel, giving up was never an option. It was then that community radios broadcast a simple message, recorded in Ouagadougou. If the wind took our trees, it also took the seeds. And the seeds know how to return. 3 days later, the brigades returned to the field. Without waiting for orders, they started digging again. Women collected the seedlings, still alive under the sand. Soldiers improvised new reservoirs with tarps and drums. Children helped, carrying small buckets of water in their hands. The images spread. In Gao, Timbuktu, Niamey, new volunteer teams joined the effort. The Green Wall was no longer a project, it was a cause. This time, they came prepared. They installed larger solar panels, created automated irrigation systems, built rock barriers against the wind, and adopted seeds genetically adapted to the dry soil. Every setback became a lesson. Every mistake, a new strategy. Months later, the satellites once again recorded the impossible. The green patches reappeared denser, stronger, more alive. Where the desert had won, hope sprouted again. Roots are stubborn, said Amadou, as he planted another seedling in the ground. The deeper the desert digs, the deeper we plant. The Sahel was not just resisting, it was evolving. The Green Wall had fallen once, but now it was reborn, not as an environmental project, but as a symbol of African Renaissance. The rebirth of the Sahel did not just come from human strength, it also came from intelligence. After the fall, the AES realized that fighting the desert required more than will it required technology, precision, and African science. In Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, local engineers transformed an old military barracks into an ecological laboratory. There, young technicians developed the country's first automated solar irrigation system powered by recycled batteries and repurposed parts from abandoned vehicles. Every drop of water now reaches the soil with surgical efficiency. In Mali, researchers created smart seeds, resistant to 50°C heat, capable of germinating even with less than 100 millimeters of rain per year. And in Niger, drones designed by university students fly over the desert, dropping biodegradable capsules filled with nutrients and beneficial microbes. These capsules open when they touch the ground, turning the sand into a living field. For the first time, innovation didn't come from outside, it came from the Sahel itself. The engineers call this the technology of survival, and it spreads like the wind. At the advanced posts of the wall, soldiers monitor the growth of the trees with solar-powered tablets. Each tree is marked with a code. Every restored hectare is registered in real time in the Pan-Sahel Environmental Data Bank, the first monitoring system created and maintained entirely by Africans. The revolution is silent, but visible even from space. Satellite images show new green patches, emerging where there were only dunes before. The world watches in surprise. The region previously called the Zone of Climate Despair has now become a global regeneration laboratory. "We are not copying Europe," says engineer Soleiman with pride. "We are inventing our own future." Solar panels reflect the midday sun. Drones cross the horizon. And between the mechanical sounds, the oldest of all is still heard: the sound of water falling on the earth. The Sahel discovered that science is not just knowledge. It is also resistance. And at the intersection of tradition and technology, a new African weapon is born: programmed hope. 5 years later, the impossible happened. What was once desert now has the color, sound, and smell of life. Satellite images show a green scar crossing the continent, 8,000 kilometers, 4,970 miles of continuous forest connecting Senegal to Djibouti. And right in the middle of it, the heart pulses the alliance of Sahel states. In Burkina Faso, entire villages were reborn. The millet and sorghum fields are producing again. Seasonal rivers are flowing again, fed by springs that had been dry for decades. The bees returned, and with them, the honey. Markets are flourishing again, full of fruit, grown in the shade of the green walls trees. The economic impact is palpable. Regional agricultural GDP grew by 12% in just 3 years, and the program has already generated over 2.5 million direct jobs. Men who previously migrated north looking for a living now work close to home. Women who once lived at the mercy of drought now coordinate sustainable production cooperatives. But the true miracle is not just economic, it is psychological. The Sahel, once seen as the hunger belt, has become the hope belt. Schools are back in operation, wells are flowing again, and children are back to believing that the future can be African. In Mali, farmers call the new plantations the people's forests. In Niger, communities that previously lived in conflict now share the same water and the same soil. In Burkina Faso, former combatants work side by side with environmental engineers. The Green Wall did something politics never achieved: it united the peoples. "It is not just a barrier against the desert," says the Prime Minister of Burkina Faso. "It is a bridge between generations. It is proof that Africa can regenerate itself." The climate has also changed. Average temperatures have dropped up to 2 degrees Celsius in arid regions, and biodiversity has expanded again. Antelopes, birds, even migratory elephants have returned. What was once dead soil now shelters young forests. And while the world still talks about carbon targets and climate conferences, the Sahel shows what it means to act. No slogans, no speeches. Just work, faith, and cooperation. The green miracle did not come from international aid. It came from the African soil, from hands that refused to fold and decided simply to plant tomorrow. From above, the Sahel no longer looks like a wound. It looks like an artery, a green line pulsating life in the heart of Africa. What was once dust is now forest. What was once silence is now the singing of birds and the sound of water. One day, all of this was sand. Now it is freedom. The sun sets, painting the sky red and gold. The voices of the brigades echo on the windwork songs, laughter, prayers. And as the last ray of light touches the tops of the trees, the narrator concludes. The green wall of the Sahel is not made of stone. It is made of faith, of sweat, of roots, of Africa.